But the bonus was I knew that I could stop it again.
Mm-hmm.
And that was amazing to know that I had control over what was happening, whereas before I'd be waking up when I did sleep in the middle of the night and be in absolute agony.
Plants beat pills, Patient 11's story. Brighton UK-based Xavier Clark was, and still is, the 11th person on the British Medical Cannabis Registry, as treatment for several ongoing conditions. Now, 2 years later, and his reliance on a variety of big pharma meds has mostly been replaced by cannabis. This is his story, and the story behind Patient 11 and his advocacy work.
I went to a little festival just around the corner from us, and I only recently gotten back into taking photos and got myself a proper DSLR. And the people at the festival asked if they could have some pictures. And I said, yeah, absolutely, that's not a problem. And they absolutely loved them. And the next thing that happened was they said, we would like you to be the principal photographer for the festival next year.
Wow.
And so it sort of snowballed out from that. And
so it became a kind of passion project, sort of became an opportunity. And I guess, is that almost similar to what you're doing with sort of Patient 11 now, isn't it? It's sort of,
it is a passion project. It was something that I feel very strongly about, like I do with my photography. And it's something that, again, I think needs to, I enjoy what I do as a photographer, but I think medical cannabis and getting that message out there is a really important thing. And if I can incorporate both my work and as a photographer and medical cannabis and getting the message across and hopefully changing the narrative of what we see as cannabis users.
But let's kind of go back to that, the Patient 11, and obviously you were as you put it, the 11th person in the UK to be on the medical cannabis register.
Yes.
What does that kind of mean for people who might not understand or not have heard of that before? What is the medical cannabis register?
So basically, a group of physicians and doctors who are looking into the benefits and the effects of cannabis. They put the patients on the registry to be able to monitor what's happening and see what different strains have effects on different people and different conditions, and it also gives more. The big advantage is with being on the registry is I'm part of the core research that is going on with the cannabis in the UK, because even though other countries across the world have had a lot of different research and of the benefits and the detriments and everything like any medication, but none of that was able to be transferred over to the UK, even with English-speaking countries like America.
Because it's a case. Sorry, I was going to say. So they've done lots of research. Lots of countries have done research into the benefits of medical cannabis, but there wasn't something like that in the UK until, was it 2018, when essentially medical cannabis became legal here? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that, do they?
Yeah, it was. 2018 was the turning point in the UK, and there wasn't anything really to back up in the UK the claims of the benefits of cannabis, and so it was a really difficult fight for the people that really needed it back then, and who've needed it for many years. But the research, even though it's in America, for example, it's not translated to the UK. So no GP, no doctor, no physician could categorically say that it was beneficial in the UK.
Right.
So with once it became legal over here and more patients were gaining access to it, they started to build up the research, and it was difficult as well because, again, it's starting from scratch. So they're taking questions from a variety of different places that are standardized.
So it's almost like a sort of link between, the sort of, I don't want to say pharmaceutical, but the sort of cannabis producers, patients, and the kind of medical board, for want of a better term. So it's a kind of. So how did you get involved with that? How did you? I mean, or maybe if we sort of rewind, what's your sort of relationship with cannabis? How did you become a sort of medical patient? I mean, we all, I guess, myself included, we all have a history to some extent with cannabis in what we might call.
Never inhaled.
Oh, absolutely, me neither. But yeah, tell us a little bit about how you came to sort of cannabis and how you came to begin a medical patient.
It was a bit of a long journey. I had my accident 6 years ago, and it started like any sort of pain journey. It started with going to the GP, and they prescribed normal over-the-counter or slightly stronger than over-the-counter medications. And as time went on, it just progressively got worse. And so they prescribed stronger and stronger things, to the point where in 2019, it really got bad. And I was on my way to a shoot up in London. And on the train, I noticed that I started to have a tremor in my jaw. And I was thinking, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can go through with the shoot. I was starting to be in absolute agony. And I had to double up on on the medications that I was taking at the time. Which
so was this kind of pain, you'd already sort of been experiencing pain as a result of the accident, and sort of fleetingly, or was it kind of the constant pain, and all of a sudden this was kind of a trigger that you just freaked you out, for want of a better term?
I was in pain constantly, but this was a whole new experience, this particular thing. And it got me worried because my injury it was a box landing on my left shoulder. And so a lot of the issues are down the left side. And when the spasms start to go quite intensely, it does start to go down my left arm, which then sends a panic signal to my brain, because it starts getting out of rhythm with my heart. And I was in a real state then. And then I managed to get through the shoot, but a few days later I was in A&E. And I was waiting there for about 5 hours, which is fair enough. But then I wasn't really treated. I was just told, you're in pain, have some morphine, off you go. And that was it. Right.
And you're already on, like you say, pain medication. What medications were you kind of on for the pain management generally before?
So I've been through quite a few different things, from gabapentin, pregabalin, a couple of other SSRIs, as well as a wide variety of opiates, including dihydrocodeine, and morphine, and Zapane, which is another codeine derivative, an opiate derivative. And at one point, and as well as that, I was taking benzodiazepine, and these were all medications that I was being prescribed by my GP. And it was at one point I was taking about 30 tablets in a day.
Wow. And that was a combination of pain management and, I guess, maybe sort of anxiety related, if you're talking about SSRIs. So again, it's that kind of compound effect that, so thank you for sharing that. That's quite dramatic. And I mean, for you, it was, you have this, you've already kind of got this existing, and again, we talk about it sort of being 2018, 2019, but that wasn't that long ago, really, was it?
It's not at all. I mean, obviously we've had the pandemic, so that kind of skews the timeline a little bit.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's still in its infancy over here.
But I mean, from the sort of pain medication, from that sort of episode you were talking about when you went to A&E and they prescribed you even more, what was the kind of turning point for you in terms of, I don't like taking all of these pills. This medication is not working. What made you think about that? Could you just tell us a little bit about that move towards cannabis from those other medications?
It was the second time I ended up in A&E, and I just thought, well, I'm taking all of these tablets and I'm still in so much agony. I've now got a constant tremor in my jaw, which when exasperates goes all the way down the left side of my body, and it almost feels like a bear hug some days when it gets really bad. And it's difficult to breathe. And
that's despite the medications, you still feel those.
Yeah. Wow. And I just thought, I've had enough. I just have had enough of this. I can't live as a person constantly taking tablets, not knowing what tablets I've taken, when I've taken them, because it just gets so confusing when you're taking that many.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter if you write them down, use the box, and everything. There's a known condition, I can't remember what it's called, but people just, when they take medication so regularly, they become blind to what they've taken, and you could present as much evidence in front of them and they still wouldn't be sure that they've taken.
Wow. And that can be very dangerous, particularly, I guess, amongst older people as well, who, well, again, for anybody, I suppose, but no, that's no. So what was so you got to that point, and so was it a case you went directly to your GP, or did they kind of refer you? And
it was a bit of a slower process. I had to, because I wanted to find out what was causing my jaw to go, was the first step into that world. And then I saw about cannabis in America helping with spasms, and then I saw that in 2018 that the first medical cannabis patient had been granted the medication, and then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of trying to find out how I can access it, and whether it is, and what are the processes. And because back then it was about a year into cannabis being available, it had to be referred through the GP. I didn't, it took several attempts before a GP would actually agree to referring me over. I got offered slow release morphine patches and a subdermal, another subdermal thing for slow release pain medication. And another GP said, well, let's look at raising what you're on. And I was thinking, I'm already on a horrific amount of opiates as it is, and I don't need to add more to the mix. And they just weren't open to the idea of me getting the help that was available, because it was such an unknown entity, and because of the rhetoric that has been drilled into GPs and doctors and society in general. They were so resistant to it, even though that they could see that all I needed was a signature from them to say, here's his medical files, have a look at them and see if he's viable. It took 4 attempts.
Wow. And that was... So I was going to say that. So that's your GP referring you to the kind of private clinics that are able to prescribe it.
Yes. It was really tough to get a GP to agree to it. But I was so relieved when one just looked at me and looked at all the medications that I had taken and was currently taking, and he just said, "Why not? I mean, if there's a chance that it can help, then I don't see a problem with it." So thankfully, he signed off on it. It took a little while after that initial consultation with my GP, and I looked into all the different clinics that were available,
Sorry, just for a timeline, when was this? This was in 2019?
This was end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
Okay, so just before the pandemic, yeah.
I was very fortunate because I had my initial consultation in February in London. So I was able to attend the clinic in person.
So was that a prerequisite at the time? You had to go there?
Yeah, okay. To get a physical examination, to make sure that that I wasn't trying it on, making sure that the notes married up with the injury, and
even with the record, so a record that no one would make up. But even with with the legacy of the medications that you've been on, you still had to go there and basically be vetted to make sure that you weren't just, like you say, trying it on. And wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
And I have to admit, they were absolutely fantastic. After, even though I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, because the consultation was that was the first stage. The next stage was they would discuss it within their team, make sure that I was a viable candidate, and so that took a couple of weeks before I got confirmation. But when I left the consultation, I broke down because it was the first time in years that somebody had properly listened to me, and I hadn't had the chance of really expressing what it was, because every time I went to my GP, they just kind of got a kind of expression of "here we go again," and to that first instance of having somebody listen was amazing. And then when I got the letter of confirmation through that I was accepted within the program, was just amazing. And it wasn't immediate with the benefits of getting cannabis. It started with pharmaceutical grade CBD, which was beneficial in some respects, but unfortunately
there was some new THC element. None of, obviously THC, just for people listening, that's the part that gets you high, and itself has its own medicinal benefits. But CBD is very much what you can buy here in the shops in various forms. That kind of, was it cannabinoid? I never said cannabinoid, cannabinol. Yeah. Anyway, CBD. I think. Yeah. But again, that's sort of, I've seen it in the pharmacy. CBD patches, CBD infused this. So that's essentially what they prescribed you, and that.
Yes.
But so was that the flower specifically, or was that an oil?
No, it was a liquid. So I would have this weird syringe that I'd put at the top of the bottle, and then measure out the amount that I was supposed to take, and then rest it under my tongue. Okay. And so it'd be absorbed, and it's like a tincture, or
yes. Again. Oh, absolutely.
And so it's one of the fastest ways to break the blood-brain barrier, and it did help in some respects. It reduced some of the pain. I was able to think a little bit clearer, but it didn't quite do what I was hoping it would do. And then after a little while, I was given a 50-50 mix of CBD and THC oil. And then I started to really notice the difference. And that was when I started to reduce my medications, because not only was I going, did I take it? I can't remember. I don't think I need to take one. And that was like the first
realization. Yeah.
That really kind of made me think there's a lot more to this. And again, it was still a slow process, because they needed to know what benefits and what effects were happening to me, and they had to take it very slowly and very carefully. And then I was prescribed just pure full spectrum THC oil, And again,
Okay.
similar to the CBD, it would be a little syringe that you put under your tongue. And again, the benefits were really noticeable. But unfortunately, my jaw was still it was just on edge, and I wasn't quite as relieved as I would have hoped. That again, it was kind of like I was going through a long process trying to work out, like any medication.
Yeah, it's well, even with prescribed pills, in the conventional sense, it's like, how much do you need? I'm not sure. Let's try this. Okay, we'll reduce that. We'll up that. And again, you're in a similar way doing that with cannabis as medicine, thinking about what's the impact? How do I feel? So you were really very much on that journey at that point.
Yes, indeed. And then I got prescribed the flower in, I think it was either June or July of 2020. So it'd been a few months from the very beginning of getting the CBD to actually getting the flower. And that moment when I had a joint for the first time was just pure relief. I couldn't believe it. My jaw stopped, my arm relaxed because it's got its own special spasm where it raises itself to my chest, and that stopped, and it was just the most amazing feeling I could have had of just being able to feel like a proper human being again.
Wow.
And that, again, that's when things started to change considerably more. It was much more noticeable because it was an instant effect. And then because I had the oil as well, so I'd have the prescribed amount of cannabis in the joint, and then I'd have the oil as well. And with that, it would extend the longevity of the effects. And the biggest surprise to all was I was a lot more focused, and I was a lot more. I was able to concentrate a lot more than I had done in years, and it was a real wake-up call.
And let me ask, to what extent do you think that was a case of, I don't have the pain in the same volume that I did before, or was it kind of the effects of the cannabis that you were using at that time, or both maybe? I mean, I know potentially. I mean, do you kind of put it down to the entourage effect, or is that? Well, what are your thoughts? I mean, I'm kind of curious.
I mean, yeah, the entourage effect is an interesting concept in itself, because I mean the body is predisposed to actually requiring cannabinoids in itself. We've got within our system the endocannabinoidal system, which is supposed to be played in harmony with other cannabinoids, and it doesn't have to come from cannabis. There are other plants out there that carry similar properties but don't have the same effects, such as mango and thyme and pink hops and various other things. But it was the pain went away, and the jaw stopped. But the problem was it's not a cure by any stretch of the imagination. It is a medication. So it stopped it, but then I could feel it coming back again. But the bonus was I knew that I could stop it again, and that was amazing to know that I had control over what was happening, whereas before I'd be waking up when I did sleep in the middle of the night and be in absolute agony and spasming, sometimes convulsing, and I'd have to reach for my normal prescribed tablets prior to getting into the cannabis program.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's dangerous because I wouldn't have a clue whether I had taken the right amount at the right time. And I'd taken about 2 or 3 accidental overdoses, and thankfully my body rejected them very quickly. But it's a very scary thing to go through.
At the same time, I guess, I mean, just that idea of going from 30 prescription pills and opioids to basically cannabis plus, I guess, well, you mentioned before around, you still having to take some sort of opiates to some extent, but essentially a lot of that medication has been completely replaced just with cannabis.
It has. I mean, the only reason I still take the opiates and I still have to take benzodiazepine for the time being is because of withdrawal. There is no other reason that I'm taking them. They have no effect on my pain or any of the other conditions that I have. They're the only thing that they do is remind me that my body needs these things because I'm addicted, and that is through no fault of my own. That is through years of being prescribed all of these things. And unfortunately, because we're still so young in the world of cannabis in the UK, there are issues with supply, and that's across the board. And it's I mean, in the UK, we are bizarrely the biggest exporter of cannabis, medical cannabis, in the world. And yet none of it can be sold in the UK. It only is purely for export to other countries. And so for my medication, it has to come from either the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, or Germany, wherever the pharmacy has got connections with. And because it's fresh produce, like anything, if there's a delay, then that causes problems down the line.
Yeah. No, I've kind of been made aware. I mean, you might have seen, I put a blog out a couple of weeks ago, so I started talking about my own initial foray into sort of medical cannabis. And again, the experience, I won't have go because this is your story, not mine, but just to kind of contrast my own kind of experience, of basically having a kind of online consultation, very much like this chat with someone, having them basically connect my medical records to the clinic, which was, as far as I know, sort of happened behind the scenes, and then literally being connected to an online dispensary, and then within 3 days having it, delivered by post. It was just astounding. And, compared with your kind of initial experience, just wow, just the difference in that short amount of time. And I mean, and again, I've heard a lot about the kind of supply chain issues. I mean, reading various sort of Reddits about UK medicinal cannabis and things like that, there's lots of people talking about, this hasn't come through. We're still waiting for this to happen. Like you say, it seems absolutely crazy that there is this supply chain issue when all it is basically, we're the biggest exporter and we're having to import it. I think it was a Canadian brand sent to me via Germany, via a dispensary in Lancashire, and I'm based in Bristol. It's
it's crazy. And so for me, because I've been on it for I think a couple of years now. In fact, it's just come up to my second anniversary as being a cannabis patient. I've experienced the highs and the lows, and it is a problem because I've tried the variety of strains that are available.
And is it based on availability, what you can have? That's essentially what dictates what you get delivered.
For the most part, I mean, I do have, there are 2 strains that I use in particular that are perfect for my condition. There's one that is it's a sativa by Bedrocan. if you look it up, it's actually called, the generic name is Jacarera of that particular strain. And that was the first one that I had from the cannabis clinic. And it really helped. It made me a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not dozy, but a little bit more sluggish than I would have liked to have been. But a hell of a lot more energized and more capable than I had been on anything else. And then they had another strain called, which was a hybrid of indica and sativa, but it was more indica. It was a higher indica strain than sativa, and that worked okay. I was a lot more. I was a lot less sluggish, but I wasn't quite there with the pain. It was kind of a bit of a trade-off. So after a while, I worked out if I mixed X amount of the sativa in with the indica sativa hybrid and make it a sativa dominant strain, that worked, and that works perfectly for me. But again, it's down to supply. And unfortunately, there's been there was a little issue recently, and so I had to go for nearly a month without any medication. And now, because I've reduced my opiate and benzo intake so much, I can't now take any more than what I'm taking, because otherwise my system will reject it. And so during those times, it's when I'm without, it becomes quite difficult. And when they've sent strains that are different, it's not worked as well as there's one that they sent over which just, it stopped my jaw, but it did nothing for the pain at all. So I was just that was frustrating in itself.
But again, the idea that exactly, you've worked out through trial and error what works for you, and the only thing stopping you from being able to do what you want to do and have the effect that you want to have from on your body is a supply and demand issue, largely dictated by the fact we still have to kind of import. And I mean, I don't want to get into the logistics of it all, but because I don't honestly know. But again, the idea that supply issue is essentially what dictates what you can and can't have, and is So it's kind of like what you want, what works, and you're still having to sort of, well, we've got this week, so how about we try that?
And I am wary of trying different things, because first of all, I don't want to take something away. If there's a supply issue, then that's going to be across the board. So I don't want to take something away from somebody that works for. And also, I don't want to spend money, and it's not cheap to be a patient. I don't want to spend a lot of money on something that might not necessarily work. So I'm very apprehensive when they say, do you want to try this one? And I've actually turned down strains after being when what I would ordinarily get isn't available, and they say, how about this? It's like, well, no, I've had that and it didn't work. I'd rather be in pain and know where I'm at than sort of at a 50-50 sort of on edge, not quite feeling right. And if I'm in full-blown pain, I can control it to a certain degree, and I know what is happening. But the ideal would be to have constant access to the medication that I need, and not feel like a pariah either, and not feel like I have to secretively take it.
No, but on those two topics, around, what do you think? I mean, again, what do you think needs to change in terms of, not just from social sort of stigma point of view here in the UK in particular, but how do you see what would need to change in order to you to get the medication that you need? How do you see that happening, or do you see that happening? Or I mean, I guess it's different in different countries, but there's a kind of legal issue here that's prohibiting that.
It is. I mean, ideally, it would be great to be able to access it through the NHS rather than through a private clinic. I think that would be a great first step, to be able to go to my pharmacy just around the corner. If there's an emergency, or if there's anything wrong with the cannabis, through any reason whatsoever. Again, it's a fresh product, so there can be any number of reasons that something can go wrong along the way. And so if there's a problem and I need to send it back, it takes about a week for that process to happen, because I've got to send it back, they've got to then check it, and then they've got to then reissue a prescription, and then that's got to get signed off, and it's got to get then back to the pharmacy, and it's all done very slowly, and it needs to be really adapted to give people the access. And I do think that the first step is get it accessible to people on the NHS. And then potentially look at having dedicated dispensaries for patients, to be able to go in and say, okay, right, I've been taking this for arthritis, I've been taking this for PTSD, or I've been taking this, that, and the other, and having somebody knowledgeable behind the counter and say, okay, right, well, this has worked for these conditions for a wide group of people. Maybe if we start off on a small amount with that, see how you get on. And basically doing the trial and error thing, but doing it in a way that is a lot more accessible and a lot easier for people, and making people feel comfortable in being able to do it, and knowing that there is somebody that has the knowledge to be able to help you.
Yeah, I mean, all of those issues, I think, again, it feels like that's still a long way off here in the UK to some extent.
It does. It does and it doesn't. I mean, there are certain rumblings and things that make me think it might be just a year, maybe 18 months away, but then there are other things that make me think, well, maybe it's about 5-10 years away. It's really difficult to gauge. But unfortunately, because cannabis is so linked to that phrase, the gateway drug, and criminality and everything. So the police, MPs, medical professionals, they've all got this sort of the stigma.
But then in your case, it sounds like it's been the opposite of a gateway drug. It's taken a lot of those other medications away from you, which is amazing. Yeah.
It has. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I used to live and work in bars and restaurants and off licenses, and I used to drink. I mean, not to excess, but I drank and everything, but I don't anymore. I haven't done for 2 years. Again, and I think that's partly down to medical cannabis. And there was a time when I was in so much pain that I did drink to help numb it at times. But now the thought of having a beer is just makes my stomach jam, which a lot of my friends would be like, where's that? What have you done with it? But again, just thinking about that impact and how it sort of changed you, and I guess, but in a positive way,
Which is fascinating. So again, tell me about sort of your advocacy work that you're doing with Patient 11. And obviously, your story is a very strong, very powerful one. How is Patient 11 is a way for you to kind of almost tell your own story and basically inform others?
Yeah. When I started, there was literally nothing in the UK about how to get help, except for Reddit forums and places that people wouldn't ordinarily know to look. So I thought, okay, there needs to be something to kind of help people get access and find out what clinics and how to do it. And now that it's become a self-referral system, so potential patients can log on to one of the various different clinics and fill out a form, and then everything goes on behind the scenes, and you don't need to speak to the GP anymore, which is fantastic because a lot of people will be put off by that straight away. But with Patient 11, what my aims are to help people to firstly get knowledge that cannabis is available as an option to get away from traditional prescribed medications, because it gets to a point where you get prescribed one thing to counteract some of the side effects of the other thing, and
absolutely.
It just becomes this kind of this vicious cycle of more and more and more tablets as well. And the other thing that there is still obviously the stigma of cannabis being an illicit substance, and going to a head shop is not necessarily something people would want to do because they wouldn't feel comfortable. They again have that reputation of,
I mean, it's a very different. I mean, again, the sort of contrast between, I guess, the head shop culture versus, going to a pharmacy or dispensary is such a different experience. And again, someone who would be interested in cannabis, if they come from a very kind of sheltered background, is how, again, I guess that in itself becomes a challenge to, like, how do you make medicinal cannabis appeal to a wider variety of people, because people will have that preconceptions, have this. And again, I guess it's all part. So that's all kind of wrapped up in what you're trying to do, is to kind of just inform people and be that kind of advocate for, actually, this is available. We need to kind of, again, just keep putting those messages out there.
Exactly.
So because you've got the website, you've got patient11.co.uk. And what do you kind of tell us a little bit about what you've got here? Because you've got obviously a little bit about your own experience, and tell us a little bit more about what the plan is here.
So I'm just going to bring it up again. That's all right.
No,
since I've looked at it on the not on the back end, so it's it's just having it's mainly to inform people that if you it's not just for pain. There's the biggest news surrounding cannabis is normally it's for people, they demonstrate people with epilepsy or seizures and having fits, and showing the almost infects, but again, it's so many more things can be treated by it, from anxiety, PTSD, addiction, as well as epilepsy, neuropathic conditions, and for me, chronic pain as well. It's and I one of the biggest things I want to be able to do with Patient 11 is not just get the information out there, but also to help people get the right things. Because when I started, there was no information out there, and then all of a sudden on my prescription it said to vape, and so I went on the whole vaping route, and I spent a lot of money trying to find a vape that didn't make me cough, because they've all got different inner workings, and There's different ways that they work, and you've got portable ones and desktop ones and all of that. So you can get lost in the world of just.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I know it's, but at the same time, it's the different ways of, I mean, again, there's such an education piece to do for so many different reasons when it comes to medicinal cannabis, like you say, from ways to consume, ways, how to get the right sort of mix, understanding the issues that are inherent in the sort of supply chain. And again, there are a few kind of definitive sources for that. And it's a case of just, again, making those sort of issues more visible and accessible. And again, I always think, people need to know that, cannabis is legal in the UK. It's medicinal cannabis. But again, the route to that for a lot of people who could actually benefit from it, is there, but they don't necessarily know that. And I think that, for me, is an important thing to kind of communicate.
It is, and the other thing that happens as well when I mention that I'm on medical cannabis is, I'm glad it works for you, in a sort of patronizing kind of way, and it's like, no, it really works, and then people talk about their own experiences on when they had a whitey or when
I've got lots of friends who just don't touch it because of like bad experiences, and again. They didn't know what they were taking. They were just, again, when you're a sort of teenager or whatever, and, someone's got some stuff and you all go and get wasted, and someone has a bad reaction. It's, again, it's a kind of cliched rite of passage, but for some people that just puts them off. And that, again, doesn't help to reinforce the stigma. It's about understanding, like you say, taking control of your own experience. And the more education and information's out there, the easier that becomes.
And yet so many people will have bad experiences going out drinking and feeling rotten the next day or even during the night. Don't get me wrong, I'm not at all. But people still go back to it and will go, oh, never again. And then 2 days later, they're back on it. And I'm just thinking, and yet you won't look at cannabis because you have one bad experience on it. It's
one bad cannabis experience versus monthly or weekly bad experiences on alcohol. But again, the irony is there. But again, it's that question of legality and what's permissible, what's socially acceptable.
Exactly. That is a big key. The social social acceptability.
Absolutely. But I think, thankfully, I think they're changing. I think there's still some way to go over here. But when, looking at, I've been speaking to a number of people over in the US and in Canada and, in many places, it's very much, well, again, there are always very kind of extreme, one extreme to the other. But in some places, particularly speaking to someone who's based in Vancouver area in Canada, it's like, it's just, you have a dispensary. It's just like another store. It's just, if you want to go get it, you can. And again, it's just treated as part of the landscape. It's not anything, for a lot of people, it's another option, and it's accessible.
It's crazy. It's funny how so many different countries have got so many different laws and rules and surrounding it. And even in the US, that's a nightmare to navigate around the rules, because just because the state has agreed to it doesn't necessarily mean that the towns within those states have said yes. And it is a fascinating. You could just write a book the size of War and Peace on just accessing cannabis.
Well, absolutely. But that's great. In terms of what's next for you, in terms of your sort of cannabis journey, and I guess for Patient 11 as well, what are your sort of plans, and where are you at in terms of
so with
what you do day to day?
With Patient 11, I've had to take a slight step back from it for a week or so, because my photography is my main priority, and that's been picking up. But what I'd like to do is get a lot more patient patient involvement with it as well. As a photographer, I get to shoot quite a lot of gigs and shows, and with both my Patient 11 and my photography platform, I post the images there. So it'd be nice to have patients being involved with that and coming to the gigs and reviewing, kind of like gig buddies, but
okay, cool.
but for patients. So they get to go out and do something that they would that they potentially have missed doing because they've not felt comfortable going out, or they've been in too much pain from previous medications, or just wary of going out with their prescription. So that's one of the avenues I'd like to that I'm actually currently going down at the moment. I'm talking with a few different I've forgotten what they are, not booking agencies, different agencies that bring in bands and things to Brighton. I also want to ideally have my own sort of branded vapes and grinders and various different things as a kind of a welcome pack to you are now a cannabis patient. This is your starter kit kind of thing. Whether it's something that people can. The ultimate goal would be to have a network of Patient 11 approved head shops, so people that can that aren't used to going to those sorts of places know that this shop has been vetted and it reaches a particular standard and stocks the right kind of paraphernalia that they need. So, for example, like an electric grinder for people that can't use their hands properly, or a good range of vapes and things like that. And so people know that they're not part of a family, I don't like that, but they're part of
it's a community aspect around it, isn't there? And to sort of foster that community as part of a wider initiative of helping people feel like they're not alone in this, and that there are other people out there who've been through that journey, and just knowing sometimes is a great comfort. And again, if there's a kind of active social life around that, as well as the additional stuff, and I mean that makes perfect sense. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other things as well. I'd like to do because I used to when I was in bars and restaurants, I loved cooking and I loved making cocktails and everything, and now I don't drink. So I make mocktails, and I'll put in my THC oil rather than alcohol in it, and so I've got a whole list of recipes of foods and that I need to get out there, because there are different things that can enhance the effect of the cannabis and help with the longevity of the benefits from it. So making foods with specific ingredients can really make a difference.
I guess it's encouraging people to use medical cannabis in different ways to sort of see what works for them. And again, if it becomes part of their if it's part of their lifestyle, it's again, a lot of people might not be comfortable with vaping or smoking or whatever you want to call it, and finding different ways to. I mean, I guess in the US and Canada, you still very much got that sort of gummy edibles kind of category that we don't necessarily have here. But again, the idea of sort of infusing different foods, and I mean, you're seeing more and more in the US this infused beverages and whole new categories opening up on the back of it. And it's kind of like, well, if they don't, people will was it necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? People like yourself So if there's if you've got a recipe for a THC infused Bloody Mary, let me know. That would be a...
Oh, it's there. Don't you worry. That was one of my favourite drinks.
Oh man!
And it was I had a masterclass in making Bloody Marys. And
oh, did you?
Oh man! Absolutely love them.
Oh,
and so yeah, I've got.
You have to let me know. We'll take that offline. But that's cool. No, thank you. No, really, really good. I'm going to, let's thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing, about your own journey and your path to medical cannabis and your thoughts. I mean, it's all, again, just keep telling people, I think. I mean, that's kind of, sounds like you're doing some great work and, you're very open about it. And thank you. So, yeah, I mean, any sort of parting thoughts or advice for anyone out there who are thinking or, struggling in a similar way that you have in the past? What would your word for them be?
I'd say just try it. If you've been on the traditional medicational route for a while and you notice that it's becoming ineffective, or your doctors start to roll their eyes when you walk in to see them, which I know I'm classed as a heart sink patient, and just give it a go. Don't listen to the stigma. It might not work for you, but it might. But the chances are it will. But again, it's like anything. If it may take a little bit of time before it actually takes full effect. Some people get the right thing right away, and it helps straight away. Other people like me, it took a little bit of trial and error, but once I found the right thing, my life changed, and I'm able to be present for my family, which is the most important thing. And I'd missed that, and I didn't notice how vacant I was and how unresponsive I was, and I've pretty much lost a few years of being with my child because I wasn't really able to function. But now I'm able to move a lot easier. I'm able to communicate a lot better than I ever have done, and I wouldn't be able to do something like this were it not for being on the prescription.